From the land of lakes, this is 10,000 Takes, brought to you by Minnesota Score Radio. Wally and Eric back for yet another week as we slice and dice the always busy, always topical, super saturated Minnesota sports scene.
Yes.
As usual, a lot to get into, but hey, we're now into mid-October. Mm-hmm. It's a bye week for the Purple, and they are one of two teams left in the NFL who have not lost, along with Kansas City. The perfect Purple at 5-0. Who would have thunk it?
Not I. Certainly not you. We had our pontifications at the beginning of the season, and neither one of us had them at 5-0. I think you had them at 1-4. I had them at 2-3. But yeah, I mean, they have played well enough. They did not exactly light the world on fire when they went over to London, but they beat the New York Jets. Matter of fact, they knocked their head coach out. Seems to be a London tradition these days. That's the third head coach now to lose his job after losing in London.
I'm surprised the Jets didn't make Robert Saleh swim back to the East Coast, because they escorted him out of the building with security when they let him go the other day. I mean, the New York Jets are very dysfunctional.
I mean, do they have guillotines over in London?
Oh,
that's Paris. Never mind.
Wow.
Yeah, anyway. So, yeah, I mean, the Vikings did everything they needed to against the Jets defensively. I mean, of course, Jets fans, including Rich Eisen, who was broadcasting the game, were not happy with the play calling. And I can't blame them to a certain degree. I mean, look, they ran pass plays 19 straight times at one point.
Yeah,
so you don't have any running backs?
It's cartoon-like. Well, they do. They have Breece Hall.
I know they do.
A very good back.
So who's making the call on that? Is that coming from the head coach, or is that an Aaron Rodgers thing? Is Aaron Rodgers partially to blame for the dismissal of the head coach? I mean, what's the deal?
Yeah, it could be a toxic situation, and now the Jets are going to have to move forward without Robert Saleh. But, you know, I look at it this way. Even if your running game isn't effective that day, you still got to do it. You got to keep the defense honest. And with a guy like Breece Hall, he may go 8 times for 12 yards, but the 9th time he might go 30 yards or more.
You don't
Big
know.
Splash play. So you got to keep the running game mixed into the equation. But for the Vikings, you know, I've heard some people the last few days nitpicking. Well, we don't look too good. Sam Darnold's coming back to earth, all this stuff. You never throw a win back, first of all.
Right.
It's hard to get him in the NFL. Second of all, sometimes you got to win a game 23-17. Sometimes you got to win it 31-30. You got to do what you got to do on that given Sunday. And I just think, are there things to tweak? Absolutely. But I think enjoy the ride, Minnesota Viking fans.
Well, all right. So compare where they are now to that team 2 years ago when Kevin O'Connell first arrived. And they went, 13-4? And they seem to be living on the edge every single week. I mean, they're kicking a last-second field goal. They're having the other team miss a field goal, going double doink. And I mean, they had all kinds of stuff that went their way, and they were winning all these games in the final seconds and just barely winning them. Now, this probably would fall into that category. I think you would agree with that. Even though they had their chances to blow them out, this kind of fell into that category of they hung on to win. But do you think that is the mode of this team, or do you think they're a better team this year?
I think they're better than 2 years ago. I mean, 5-0 is 5-0. What the concern would be the last 2 weeks, and believe me, even when you're winning, coaches micromanage. There's never been a head coach that's seen his team play a perfect game. So we know KOC and Brian Flores, they're working on this. They had a huge lead at Green Bay. They almost coughed it up. If not for some Packer turnovers, including a careless throw by Jordan Love, maybe they lose that game.
Right.
They have the big lead over the Jets over there in London,
yep.
And they almost coughed that up. So I think one thing I would be focused on is, hey, we got to learn how to put these teams away. They did that against Houston. They pretty much did that against San Francisco. I thought that was a misleading final score.
Yeah, the Aaron Jones fumble kind of changed that a little bit.
But it's probably good that KOC and the staff have something to work on. They can look the guys in the eye after they come back from their bye break and say, we're not as good as we think we are. And in the NFL, that's true, right? I mean, just a few days ago, Seattle was 3-0. Now they're 3-2, including a loss at home to the New York Giants.
Yeah. Okay. So I mentioned Aaron Jones, and he got hurt and did not play the majority of the game this past Sunday against the New York Jets. His status, they say it's not a long-term injury. That's what Kevin O'Connell has most recently said. What exactly does that mean? I'm a little concerned that they haven't quite figured out how long he's going to be out. Is it 2 or 3 weeks? Will he possibly be back against the Detroit Lions? Because notably, the offense was a little bit different, maybe even a lot different once Aaron Jones went out of that game against the Jets. He is a tremendous weapon.
It's a huge concern, and he can catch the ball out of the backfield.
Absolutely.
Too. So he's a multi-dimensional running back. The bye week does give them some time to figure out, Aaron Jones and his injury status. Look, one of the things I like about this Vikings team as opposed to 2 years ago or even last season when they cratered, they're way more physical. They're playing like the 49ers or the Texans or some of these Philadelphia, these real physical punch-you-in-the-mouth teams. I like that. I think that's a good sign. But wait till they line up against Detroit. Now, the Lions got to get through Dallas this week, and that's a road game, so that's going to be difficult. But Detroit's going to come in here, and it's going to be a huge NFC North battle. And if the Vikings can knock off the Lions, all of a sudden you have divisional wins against Green Bay and Detroit, so you take charge early in the NFC North. If the Lions get the win, I'd watch out for Detroit.
Okay. All right. We're going to talk some Minnesota Twins. We'll talk some Gopher football a little later as well, but we're going to talk some Minnesota Twins with one of their beat writers.
Stick around. We are 10K Takes, your purple Kool-Aid ticket.
Oh, boy.
Finding the ideal place to stay is important for business travelers. Lakeville, Minnesota is conveniently located off I-35, just south of the Twin Cities with a variety of hotel choices. Lakeville offers convenient amenities such as shopping, walking trails, golf, and more. Our unique meeting spaces, historic downtown, live music, and over 60 dining options are sure to impress. Book your next stay in Lakeville and experience convenience, comfort, and quality. Find your perfect hotel at visitlakeville.org.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earring. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision. It's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
10,000 takes continuing along, and I know for the Minnesota Twins, the baseball season is over. Obviously, the playoffs continue, the drive to get to the World Series, something that the Twins haven't done since 1991, but they made some changes prior to the playoffs starting, and will they have any effect becomes the next question. And we're going to talk now to Bobby Nightengale. He is the beat writer, or one of the beat writers for the Minnesota Star Tribune for the Minnesota Twins. All right, Bobby, let's start out with I guess you could call it a house cleaning of assistant coaches. I termed it as rearranging the deck chairs in the Titanic as opposed to actually making the move, to either go a different direction with Rocco or at the GM spot. I know Thad Levine is gone, but let's start with the assistant coaches.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those, there's so many things went wrong in the final 6 weeks when you only win 12 of your final 39 games. I mean, there's a lot of areas you could point to. They're basically saying they want to change their hitting approach. If you look at like the season offensive numbers, they're about a league average team. Obviously, they struggled the last 6 weeks. They struggled kind of the first 6 weeks too, and they were pretty good in the middle. But so they got rid of all three hitting coaches, and they got rid of infield coach Tony Diaz. They thought their infield defense cost them games down the stretch. And you look at some guys with like Edward Julian, who I thought he looked better defensively last year than he did this year. And like Royce Lewis didn't have a great defensive year. So making changes there. Obviously, they could have gone bigger. I mean, if you wanted to say it was on Rocco and make a change there, I'm sure that at least had to have been part of the thought process is how high do we go with this? But for now, I mean, next year's obviously going to be a year where a lot of guys are on the hot seat and there's going to be a lot to prove for them to make the playoffs. But for now, the hitting coaches and the infield coach take the brunt of the blame.
And Bobby, let's spin it back to last offseason. So the Twins are the defending AL Central champs. They snapped their long postseason losing streak. They create some buzz by getting to round 2 before Houston bounces them from the postseason. But right away, the buzz is gone when the poll ads say we're going to pair payroll. Sonny Gray is gone. They're not going to bring him back. And I feel like the Twins thought they could get away with that because at the time the AL Central was mediocre. Maybe Cleveland was the only team you feared. But did they misread the room? Because Detroit and Kansas City sure got good quick, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, you could look at it 2 ways. I mean, with 6 weeks left in the season, they were 2 games out of the best record in baseball. And it got to them to that point. Obviously, they could have used an extra pitcher after Joe Ryan went down. But I don't think they underestimated the competition. Like, I think they knew Cleveland was going to be better. I don't know if anyone saw Kansas City going from 100 losses to a playoff team, or Detroit pulling off what they did after, especially when they were sellers at the trade deadline.
If they go a different direction this offseason and bring in a free agent or make a trade, what do you suppose they might do? What is there a particular position? Do you think that they're going to try and trade for a starter? Do you think they'll try and go to the free agent market and get a starter? Where do you think that they're going to head?
Yeah, I would probably say the middle of the lineup. I mean, you lose Carlos Santana at first base. I think first base turns into kind of a big hole there. You lose Max Kepler in right field. Both those guys are free agents. Maybe you add an outfielder that can bring something to the lineup. But, their payroll is pretty tight. I mean, they said they're not going to cut payroll. There's not going to be a significant reduction like last year. But you look at where they're coming in, it's basically the same level. Where they're starting this upcoming offseason is kind of the same level where it was, just because Pablo Lopez, his salary jumps from $8 million to $21 million. There's some other guys. Carlos Correa gets a small raise. Arbitration gets a lot of guys significant raises. So after all that's added up, I mean, you basically are starting with the same payroll. So I think the trade market's going to be where they're going to have to do it. Starting pitching wise, I mean, you look at if guys come back healthy, Joe Ryan, Pablo Lopez, Bailey Ober, Chris Paddock, and maybe Simeon Woods Richardson. That's a solid 5. I mean, there'll be a few teams that have better, but I mean, you could definitely be worse. So I do feel like pitching depth is okay. Maybe you want to add like a frontline starter, and that's going to have to come through a trade. But they have some infielders to trade if they want to make a deal happen, and I think that's probably where they're going to have to do most of their offseason is through the trade market.
Is everything good with Royce Lewis? I mean, he's got the explosive bat, brings a lot of energy to the field. But I felt like in the end, maybe, there was some disagreements between him and Rocco, maybe even Carlos Correa. Am I right about that? Because he did tail off too numbers-wise.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he definitely hit a wall the last, month of the season. For him, I think he looks at it as, I haven't really played since 2019 consistently. And his body really wasn't prepared for handling the longest stretch that he's been healthy in a long time. I mean, for most guys, I think he probably played around 80-some games, and most guys, that's just half a season. For him, it's, the most he's played in 5 years. So I think it took a toll on him, and I think that's kind of where you saw some of the frustration from others. You mentioned like Carlos Correa, saying some of the young guys they were hoping would pick him up, and they didn't. And I think there was frustration on that end. Because, I mean, if you look at it a year ago when they made the playoffs and won a playoff series, it was the young guys that really brought a ton of energy at the end of the season. Edward Julian was their leadoff hitter. Matt Wallner was really good the second half. Royce Lewis, obviously, with all his heroics, was great in the last month of the season. And then this year, Edward Julian barely played. Matt Wallner was really good again. But Royce Lewis hit a wall. Brooks Lee wasn't very good the last couple of weeks. So you look at all the young guys, and they kind of didn't provide the lift that they did the year earlier. And when you have guys like they were missing Buxton for a little bit, Carlos Correa missed a couple months, that's where you're going to have to count on those young guys when you cut payroll. And, that's something where they fell short. It's just the young guys just were unable to kind of sustain their play in September.
You mentioned that Carlos Santana is likely not to be brought back on a new contract next year, which I think might be a mistake. Who would play first base? Do you think that that's a Jose Miranda thing and Royce Lewis plays third? Do you think that's what they're looking at?
Yeah, I think probably Jose Miranda at first base. You remember Alex Kirilloff, he missed most of the season with an injury, but he could be a guy there. You also, I mean, infield-wise, I mean, say you have Royce Lewis at third, Carlos Correa at short, Brooks Lee at second. You have a lot of infielders that could fill that first base role. Edward Julian maybe. and some other guys that have spent most of the year in the minor leagues could kind of contribute off the bench in that area. But I think that's one free agency. If you're going to sign a free agent, that's probably a spot to go. Not saying that there's no chance they sign Carlos Santana, but you just look at kind of their history. They don't really re-up with free agents that often. It seems like once a guy is a free agent, he leaves. So probably Jose Miranda, Edward Julian, or Alex Kirilloff. I'd put those three guys at the top of the list right now.
Bobby, before you came to Minneapolis to cover the Twins, you were the Reds beat guy for the Cincinnati Enquirer. We lost the hit king, recently, Pete Rose. What did he mean to that city? And the Great America Ballpark's on Pete Rose Way, but he could never get in the Hall of Fame, all that stuff. What was it like being in Cincinnati and in the land of Pete Rose?
Yeah, I mean, he's a Cincinnati native from the west side of Cincinnati. So, I mean, kind of a historic guy there. I mean, just one of us. I mean, you look at kind of the St. Paul history with Joe Mauer and Dave Winfield and Jack Morris and those guys. I mean, it's kind of similar. Just the fact that Pete probably was, if you go like telling the history of baseball, I mean, he's probably one of the top 20 players you have to mention. I mean, led the majors in hits. You look at all the wins he's had. I mean, obviously there was a lot of negatives. I mean, the betting on baseball is the number one rule. He had a lot of off the field issues. Obviously, it's something where he really wasn't welcomed back after he was on the suspension list. But I don't think you can tell the story of the Reds. I mean, the Big Red Machine, he was right in the middle of it, and that's the story of the Reds. Is I think you have to start there, and he was the face of the Big Red Machine. Him, Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, those guys. So him being a hometown guy and him being on that team, I think he meant so much to the community, and obviously a big loss there.
Well, Bobby, we appreciate you spending some time with us, giving us some insight on what's going to happen here in this offseason. We'll definitely check back with you as the hot stove heats up a little later on. We know one thing. They've got a TV deal. That we found out this week, so that's the good news going forward.
Yeah, cable or no cable, they'll at least fans can watch if they want to.
It is. All right, thanks, Bobby. He is Bobby Nightengale. He is the Minnesota Star Tribune Minnesota Twins beat writer with us here on 10,000 Takes. Stay with us. Eric and I will be back with more after this time.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earring. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision, it's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
You can visit llcoolj.info to understand what the government grants really hit for. You can visit llcoolj.org.com to make sense. Whatever you sell, the government's buying it. You don't need an LLC or an S corporation. We the people. We already pledged allegiance to this nation. It's up to us if the bell toll of freedom rings. That's word from Olivia's child, Sammy's favorite sibling, and I'm out.
10,000 Takes. Well, I know what they were shouting as they ran onto the field last Saturday. How about them Gophers? They knocked off USC, who was ranked as high as number 7 in the nation. And, of course, USC in some polls had completely dropped out. So if you lose to the Gophers, you go from anywhere from number 7 to number 11 out of the top 25. What does that tell you?
Not a lot of respect for the U of M and a crushing loss for USC. I was there. I saw that field rush. I was in disbelief. I mean, it was purely organic. It was spontaneous. It was a lot of fun. There's no doubt about it. It's a signature win for the Minnesota Gopher program. They hadn't beaten USC since 1955.
Wow.
What is that, the Eisenhower administration?
Wait a minute now. They've only played them like 8 or 9 times.
Oh, I know, but still.
Okay, that's true. There's some truth to that.
Anyways, everybody had a party in Dinkytown last week, and great win for the Gophers because USC came in desperate. They already had one loss. Now they're 2, as you said, they're unranked. So it wasn't like USC was overlooking Minnesota, in my opinion. And so if you go back to the Michigan game, when the Gophers had that bad call on the onside kick, we don't know if they would have tied it or won it in Ann Arbor. They would have an opportunity, right? So the premise being, what if they would have won that game, then beat USC? Minnesota's got to be ranked, right?
Yeah. Woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Yes, indeed.
Well, and this week they're playing at the Rose Bowl. Their first trip to the Rose Bowl since what?
78
in
a regular season.
Right, and only 3 games in history against UCLA. The 77-78 seasons, they were back-to-back, home and home. They won one, UCLA won one, and then they beat UCLA in the Rose Bowl, in the actual Rose Bowl game.
1962, for those of you who weren't around then, and it was the first college bowl game in color on television. NBC carried the game.
How about that?
Mel Allen, who's known as the baseball guy, right? He was the play-by-play broadcaster. Yeah, it's been many moons. There's going to be a flock of Gopher fans in SoCal this week. I'm going to be out there to chronicle what happens.
All right.
I'll tell you about it.
All right.
Next week.
I will look forward to that next week. Okay. Are you on board with the hockey season starting already? So the National Hockey League is underway. We know college hockey gets an early start as well. Yeah. The Gophers have already played. St. Cloud State's already played. Are you on board already? Are you excited about hockey? I know one thing. I don't think that the folks over in St. Paul, I'm talking about the Capitol, are real thrilled with the concept that was thrown out by Craig Leopold, that not only does he need $300 million to upgrade a facility that doesn't need it, by the way, we're talking about the XL Energy Center, but in addition, he says he'll throw in an extra $250 million. He needs more than that because he wants to put up a hotel and a convention center, a 650-room hotel. So what does this all mean? How much are they going to want to bleed out of our taxpayer dollars?
A lot. Remember a few decades ago, the buzzword was luxury suites? Once owners figured out they could charge more to put fat cats in suites, and that became, it spread through sports like a cancer. Well, the new thing now is battery. We can blame the Atlanta Braves for the battery. And what that is, in the Braves ballpark, which has been around about 5 years, they built all this stuff around it, restaurants, bars, places to go, to drive people to the area, and then the team cashes in along with the money they make on the ticket sales. Well, I think the Wild want their own battery. The Kansas City Royals do. They're holding the city hostage down there to leave the K, which I think is one of the best venues in baseball, to go downtown. I don't like it. And you're right. The XL Energy Center, there's nothing wrong with it. It's generally viewed as one of the top arenas in North America, especially for hockey. So, you know what? I don't know if this is going to go over too well in St. Paul with Governor Walz or Governor Flanagan or whoever's running the state.
Well, that remains to be seen here. We'll find out in a few weeks. So the owners, is what you're saying, not only want revenue from ticket sales and from the team and from the suites, they also want to own or lease the property around it. So they want to own the restaurants and bars, or they want to lease the property to people who run restaurants and bars and make money off of that. They're tired of tailgaters like you that freeload and eat out of the back of your car.
They are.
That's exactly what it is. And they don't want the restaurants who are in downtown St. Paul, they don't want them making the money. They want to make the money.
They don't want Tom Reed making money
with
his thing down 7th Street.
Don't tell Tom that.
And the other thing is, the trend is definitely real. Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, the 49ers took away some tailgate spaces with their battery. I saw it at Lambeau. They now have Tailgate Village, where it used to be a tailgate spot.
And what do you think that longhouse thing is sitting out in front of U.S. Bank Stadium? Tell me that isn't the same kind of concept on a smaller scale.
Yeah, they're going to want a battery over there, too.
No
question.
They are. Ziggy's going to want to get his hands into that, too. All right. The always interesting, sometimes controversial, and always fun takes of the day coming up next. Stay with us.
Finding the ideal place to stay is important for business travelers. Lakeville, Minnesota is conveniently located off I-35, just south of the Twin Cities, with a variety of hotel choices. Lakeville offers convenient amenities such as shopping, walking trails, golf, and more. Our unique meeting spaces, historic downtown, live music, and over 60 dining options are sure to impress. Book your next stay in Lakeville and experience convenience, comfort, and quality. Find your perfect hotel at visitlakeville.org.
I've been meaning to give you these for many years. I think they're perfect.
Maya?
Oh, I love your earring. Why didn't you try these?
It isn't just about vision, it's about care. Nobody cares for eyes more than Pearl.
10K takes on television as we wrap up yet another episode. Big shout out to the viewers in the Twin City. How about that? Watching on Fox 9 Plus.
Yes, and Fox Local and MCN 6, all kinds of places here in the Twin Cities you can find us.
Yeah, so we're going to get into a guy that we know very well and is one of the iconic Minnesota Vikings. He's finally making the cut on the senior list for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now, it's ridiculous that he even has to go through this song and dance, but hopefully Chuck Foreman gets the Hall call.
Yeah, he's one of the final 60, if you will. And then they're going to trim it down to 50. I don't know why you go from 60 to 50, but whatever. So this is a senior list of players who played prior to 1999. So you have to be out of the league 25 years to qualify for it. And Chuck's on the list. He's on there with a number of others, including running backs Larry Brown and quarterback Roman Gabriel. So there's some names on there for sure. It's not going to be an easy role for him to hold, but hopefully Chuck gets in.
I would just say this, and there are great players on that list. I don't think any of them made more impact on their team than Chuck did. Because when Chuck arrived in the Twin Cities in 73, the Vikings went to 3 Super Bowls in like 4 years. And believe me, without him, they would not have played in those Super Bowls.
That's all you need to know. All right. I believe we're going to get
takes of the day. Yeah. We'll find out what your mood is. Angry American, Demanding Diva, what is it today?
Well, this past Saturday, I spent the afternoon along with my family on the prairie over in River Falls, Wisconsin, watching Division III college football. UW River Falls, UW Eau Claire was a blowout, 71-14. My alma mater, River Falls, rolling to victory. But that's not where I'm going with this. So we're there. It's a beautiful Saturday afternoon. It's homecoming. The stands are packed. The band is there for UW River Falls. They have a pep band, a marching band there. And they played at halftime. They played a couple numbers at halftime. But during the game, they're playing like, I don't know, these little fight songs and stuff like that. And lo and behold, the loudspeaker, they're blasting these stupid jock jams that you hear at every single sporting event you go to. You go to a Wild game, you go to a Timberwolves game, you go to a Twins game, you go to a Vikings game, Gophers. You get just blasted out of your chair with the same disco DJ type of music, and I am tired of it. Can we at least stay away from this at Division III college football out on the prairie when you got the band there? Oh, my goodness. I was like, holy Toledo, please stop this. Let the kids play. Don't drown them out with those stupid jams that I hear at every single venue. Cut it out.
All right. Let me see what that mood meter says. Oh, yeah. Demanding Diva.
No more DJs at these events.
He doesn't want this cutting-edge jock jam stuff. Okay. All right. Well, my take of the day.
Yes.
Do you believe in Al Michaels? Yes, I do. But apparently the critics don't. He does Thursday Night Football, which condolences to Al that you're saddled with that package. But you know what? He's getting a lot of blame from people for not getting excited enough during the games when he's doing the broadcast. So I've listened to a lot of his highlight cuts, including touchdowns. I see nothing wrong or hear nothing wrong with Al's calls. He's fine. He's iconic. You don't need somebody that's screaming every second of the game. It's okay to wait for the moment when you get excited. These people criticizing Al Michaels, they have no idea what good broadcasting is. And believe me, there aren't that many of them in the NFL these days. But Al's one of them. So I say leave Al Michaels alone.
Yeah, he is. Like you said, he's iconic for sure.
All right, we got to go. Thanks for tuning us in. This is 10K Takes, your sports